Let's go. Thank you so much for taking a look at this video. It's your man, it's your friend, it's your brother Cordell Glass, and reading the Bible is vital. I thank you so much for taking a moment to check this out. If you haven't seen previous videos on this channel, go back, take a look at all of the videos we did with the First Kings and the past a few that we've done with the book of Second Kings here. Today we're going to do something a little bit different than what we've done in the past videos. In the previous videos, we've taken the time out to literally read the entire chapter, and I've done a lot of exegeting of the text, prophesying, all kind of awesome things, explaining how the scripture spoke to me personally, doing all that fun stuff. But today we're going to do maybe some of that, but we're not going to read the entire chapter, if any. If you have a Bible, you can go ahead and take a second to pull up 2 Kings chapter 4. That's what we're going to focus on today. 2 Kings chapter 4. I'm going to, let me see. I'm going to look at it like this. So I'm looking at it in the New Living Translation right now, and that's what I read. I read it in the New Living Translation the past couple of days, as well as in the Christian Standard Bible. I've read it, and the New Living Translation, I'm looking at it right now through the YouVersion Bible app. By the way, if you don't have that app on your phone, if you have a smartphone, which I'd say 90% of people in the United States at least have a smartphone, in other parts of the world, most people have smartphones nowadays, it seems, as well. But nevertheless, if you do have a smartphone, download the YouVersion Bible app. I think you'll love it. I absolutely love it. There's so much on there. Check it out. But in the New Living Translation, it breaks up this chapter in 3 sections. One section much longer than the other, or the middle section much longer than the first and third sections. So the first section is verses 1 through 7. And the New Living Translation subtitles it, Elisha Helps a Poor Widow. The second section is titled, Elisha and the Woman from Shunem. Some might read it as the Woman from Shunammite, or the Shunammite Woman, rather. Elisha and the Shunammite Woman is how it might read in some. And this is verses 8 through... Let's see here. Scrolling. 8 through 37. Wow, so much longer story. And then the third portion is titled Miracles During a Famine. And that's verses 38 through the rest of the chapter, which is the last verse is verse 44. Let's take a look at that first section here. Again, you can take the time to read it. I'm not going to do that today. But summing up the story, there's a widow of there was a company of prophets that oftentimes accompanied Elijah and Elisha on many of the journeys. And one of the prophets from the group, he passed away. So his wife was left with a child, and I believe it was with the child. Let me make sure. Yeah, her sons. So she had several sons, and she had some debts that needed to be paid off. The widow, her and her sons had debts to be paid off, and they were in a position where they didn't have much, and the idea was probably that they were going to end up starving to death. Or, heck, in those crazy days, who knows, she might have been sold into slavery or something crazy like that. But nevertheless, she came to Prophet Elisha because the expectation is that those closest to kin, in the culture that they lived in, the expectation is those that are closest to kin would care for widows and orphans. And in this situation here, it doesn't say if the prophet had family members But this group of prophets that he was with, and Elisha, I can imagine, were the closest thing that they had to family. So coming to Elisha, he told her to get as many jars as she possibly could from friends and neighbors and fill them with olive oil. And what ended up happening is the jars kept coming and the jars kept filling. It said soon every container was full to the brim. And there were so many jars of olive oil being filled. And Elisha told her in the last verse in verse 7 here, said, now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on whatever is left over. And so if we go to, I believe it's James chapter 1, verse 27, it talks about being truly religious. I know it's popular in some pop culture Christianity right now to bash religion or being religious. It really irks my nerve because it's so unbiblical. It's become very popular in a lot of circles that I'm even connected to. It's frustrating, but nevertheless, biblically, true religion is to care for widows and orphans and to keep yourself unstained from the world, basically. So to walk in holiness. So be concerned about your internal state, but also be concerned about those around you that God has put in position for you to influence and to provide for. And one thing that I love about this story is oftentimes we think that caring for somebody means that we simply are giving to them. And what Elisha did is gave a word of wisdom to this woman, and God worked a miracle on her behalf. So much so that she was able to start a small business. She was able to take these jars and start full of oil and start a small business that had a residual income available, that had residual effect rather. And oftentimes we just want, it says, give a man a fish and he won't be hungry. Teach a man to fish and he'll never go hungry. And something along the lines of, you guys may have heard of that before. I think the next one is like, give a man a pond and he's set for a lifetime, something along those lines. I'll try to find out exactly what it is and maybe put it in the description. This is off the top of the head, but nevertheless, it's all about, what it boils down to is empowering people, not simply doing everything for everybody. The best thing you can possibly do for somebody is teach them how to take care of themselves, put them in position to where they learn how to, for instance, even on a spiritual matter, if somebody calls you for prayer, don't always just pray for them. Ask them to pray so that you can come in agreement with their prayer. If they're not really sure what to pray, give them some ideas of how they can formulate their thoughts in order to pray effectively. And so now you've empowered that person to be able to pray. And once they become more confident in their prayer life, they'll be able to empower other people on how to pray. And reading the Bible, teaching people how to study the Bible takes it another step. Showing people how to look for the historical context, showing people how to use the Greek lexicon and the Hebrew Strong's Concordance, things of that nature. You're empowering people instead of always just force feeding everything, always spoon feeding rather everything to somebody. Figure out a way that you can empower them to do it. I love being able to teach my son new things, my daughter new things, but it's even better when I can show them, I can model it for them, and then I can say, here, it's your turn, now you do it. And now my daughter, she won't let me brush her teeth anymore if I wanted to. She's empowered to brush her own teeth now, and she wouldn't have it any other way at the age of 2, and I love it. So let's figure out ways that we can empower people so that God can work supernaturally in their lives, to where if we're no longer around, they can do well without us being present. Sometimes we cripple church leaders that may be looking at this video. Sometimes we cripple our congregation because we're not training them. We're not training them. We're not equipping them. Equipping means you're putting something in someone's hand. We're called to equip as the spiritual gifts of Jesus to the church. We're called to equip the saints so that they can be able to discern, so that they can be able to no longer be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. Ephesians chapter 4 verses, I forget, I'll put that in the description as well. So yeah, that really stood out to me. Moving into the next story about Elisha and the woman from Shunem. I may read a little bit of this. One day Elijah went to the town of Shunem. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to come to her home for a meal. After that, whenever he passed that way, he would stop there for something to eat. He had his own personal Airbnb. Come on, somebody. She said to her husband, I am sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. So she's married, but it mentions that she's wealthy. So I'm assuming she had her own streams of income. Her husband may have worked, but she might have been bringing so much bread in where he didn't have to work, and maybe he was focusing on some other things. I don't know. But I thought that was pretty cool that it mentioned that she was wealthy. Not him, not the husband, but she was wealthy. Verse 10, let's build a small room for him on the roof and furnish it with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. Then he will have a place to stay whenever he comes by. Man, if you're looking at this video, if you know me, if you're in another city, another state, maybe we gotta get to know each other. When I come to your city, when I come to your state, I would love to stay at your home and prepare room for me. If you got bread like this woman right here, that's awesome. I'd love to have a room prepared just for a special guest every time they come in, like she was able to do for Elisha. Elisha must have had a serious effect on this family right here. That's pretty awesome. It says one day Elisha returned to Shunem, and he went up to his upper room to rest. He said to his servant Gehazi, tell the woman from Shunem I want to speak to her. When she appeared, Elisha said to Gehazi, tell her we appreciate the kind concern you have shown us. What can we do for you? Can we put in a good word for you to the king or to the commander of the army? No, she replied. My family takes good care of me. So her family takes good care of her. Maybe she's wealthy because of some type of family estate. Maybe she's receiving some type of inheritance from her parents. That's possibly the case. Later, Elisha asked Gehazi, what can we do for her? Gehazi replied, she doesn't have a son, and her husband is an old man. Call her back again, Elisha told him. When the woman returned, Elisha said to her as she stood in the doorway, Next year at this time, you will be holding a son in your arms. No, my Lord. She's like, she cried, oh man of God, don't deceive me and get my hopes up like that. Okay, so she did want a child. But sure enough, the woman soon became pregnant. And at that time, the following year, she had a son, just as Elisha had said. Thank God for prophecy coming to pass, because, yeah, it's not the worst to get your hopes up, expecting something to happen. And it's sad because a lot of people don't even hope anymore because they've had their hopes let down so many times from people that would that would give their word and not follow through with it. The Bible says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And so people become really depressed and challenged to wonder whether God is really on their side, because people have let them down with broken promises, or even so much as people coming forth with false prophecy, meaning well, maybe perhaps, but not speaking from the voice, the mouth of God, the voice and mouth of God, but speaking simply what they would like to see for their friends and their family. Instead of saying, man, I really hope that you have a baby this time next year, they'll say confidently, without hearing this from God, they'll say, this time next year you're going to have a child, and God never even spoke that, never endorsed that, never sanctioned it. It wasn't in his plan at all. And so it causes some individuals to get their hopes up for nothing. And so we got to be very careful with putting our word out and not following through, A. And then B, making sure that we're not saying something is from the Lord, saying the Lord said this or the Lord said that, when indeed that's really just our heart's desire for a particular person in our meaning well for them. So verse 18, it talks about the woman had a child, and when he got older, he was talking about his head hurt, and he ended up dying. And immediately the woman, she had to get the word over to, she sent a servant and a donkey over to get the word to Elisha, so that Elisha can be aware of the passing of this child. And in doing so, immediately Elisha called for Gehazi to go to the home and lay his staff on the child's face, expecting that the child was going to rise from the dead. But that did not work. And so Elisha ended up making his way to the house, and he laid on top of the child in a really weird situation. I don't really understand why it happened this way, but he stretched out on top of this kid. It says that verse 34 talks about he laid eye to eye and hands to hand and mouth to mouth with this child, and the body began to be warm. And he did it once again after pacing around the room. And then the boys woke up, and he sneezed 7 times, and then he opened his eyes. I have no idea what all of this means. I'm gonna have to look more into the scripture at some point and study this. But then verse 36, Elisha summoned Gehazi. "Call the child's mother," he said. And when she came in, Elisha said, "Here, take your son." She fell at his feet and bowed before him, overwhelmed with gratitude. Then she took her son in her arms and carried him downstairs. Really cool story. This is all about just the workings of miracles due to the compassion of Elisha. Elisha being religious, truly religious. It put him in position to be used by God as a vessel that was willing to walk in holiness, to hear the voice of God and obey, and to really love on people, and see the practical needs of people, and perhaps even the supernatural needs, but more so than anything, meeting those practical needs, finances, health, things of that nature. So the next story talks about a miracle during a famine. There was a pot of stew that was being made by the group of prophets. There was a famine in the land, but one day they went and grabbed herbs and wild gourds. But come to find out, these herbs were actually poisonous. They were poisonous. And Elisha told them to bring some flour, and he threw it into the pot, and it was no longer poisonous. And so it says here that they gave, verse 44, and when they gave it to the people, there was plenty for all, and some left over, just as the Lord had promised, because they didn't think that the pot was going to be enough food. It reminds me of the story of the 2 fish, 5 loaves of bread. And then I believe another part of the Gospels, it might even say like 3 fish and 7 loaves of bread, or 2 fish, 5 loaves of bread. We'll check that out as well in one of the other Gospels. But in those stories, it talks about how Jesus was able to put this food in the hands of the disciples, and they distributed to feed 5,000, maybe even 7,000 people. So the miraculous workings of God, when we're just walking in obedience, he will meet our practical needs. He cares about every detail of our lives. He doesn't want us to go hungry. He doesn't want us to go thirsty. He doesn't want us to die prematurely. And every now and then, there's a supernatural what's the word I'm looking for? Intercession. There's a supernatural interception. There's a supernatural occurrence that takes place that meets our natural needs. And at the end of the day, because of how miraculous it is, we can easily say, man, that wasn't nothing but God. And so we thank God for his ability to meet the small, minute details of our lives, all the way up to the biggest, ginormous needs that we have, even those things that sometimes we don't even realize we have need of. He's a good God. He's a good Father. And thank God for the people that he puts in our lives, like Elisha, like you watching this video. If you're not truly religious, become truly religious. Set yourself apart for holy use. Become a vessel that God can entrust with his glory. Become a vessel that God can work his miracles through. Become a vessel that would be able to speak his words and not simply what sounds good, what we hope for people. And let's make sure that we also position ourselves to always be compassionate. Look for ways that we can meet the needs of people. Some people may not always come to us as boldly as they came to Elisha, spelling out what their needs are, but we can look for signs of areas in which people that we are called to serve are in need of. All right, so God bless you, and we'll be back with the next video soon. 2 Kings chapter 5. God bless. Please like, please subscribe, please share. Peace.